Hello, welcome to InnovaDID. My name is Anna, and this is a channel dedicated to innovating the perception of dissociative disorders. And if you have never heard of a dissociative disorder before, then you are in luck, because that's what this video is about. But before that, I just wanted to explain a little bit about who I am. So I am a part of a system which is created in a dissociative disorder. And a system is basically overall just a collection of multiple different identities, multiple different alters, and those alters are all, for the most part, able to take over the body and can have their own experiences, their own ideas and perceptions of the world. So my system name is Polyphoresis, don't think I said that. And I haven't been on this channel before, so I wanted to just explain a little bit about who I am. So Tegan was front stuck for about a month, which means that he was pretty much trapped out in the body and he couldn't get inside. And for us, that's distressing, because we like to be able to share time in the body with each other, because our system is meant to function with each other, so it's really difficult when we lose that. And basically, he is not quite all the way inside, but while Tegan was fronting, I was co-conscious, which means I was nearby. And so I could see and hear things, and I could interact a little bit, but I couldn't fully take control of the body. And we seem to have just switched places. So Tegan is now where I was and just passively influencing thoughts, feelings, emotions, which means I can feel all of those things from him. He can't get inside all the way, and I seem to be stuck here now in place of him. So he's getting at least a little bit of a break, but I'm here now, and we will make a system update video on exactly what's going on there, because we figured out a little bit more about it. But it just depends on, not everyone in this subsystem wants to be a part of the channel, so there's a lot of things we're going to probably need to take out. So we have to just take our time with that one. But basically, today's video, I just wanted to we've done a video on what DID is a long time ago, but since then we've learned a lot about what systems are and the different types of systems there are, and we've noticed that most of the time when you hear about systems, what is talked about is dissociative identity disorder, which is what we're diagnosed with, or OSDD 1B, which I will go into both of those in a little bit more detail in a minute. But there is a more varied system experience than I think is commonly acknowledged in the community and is commonly talked about, and it's something that we are currently doing more research in to kind of start a series where this video I'm gonna go do an overview of kind of all types of systems in one place, and in the next video, or not the next video, but the next video for this series, we'll go more in depth on OSDD, and then we'll talk more about TBMC systems in another video, which we're also going to cover briefly here. But we just wanted to kind of like give a voice to the less frequently talked about experiences of being a system, as well as maybe just give more information to start out for someone who's just learning about DID. So like if you do encounter people talking about other things, you'll be able to be like, okay, wait, I just figured it'd be easiest to kind of go over it all at once first before just diving into the individual videos. So, first we're gonna just briefly cover dissociative identity disorder, because I think that that kind of gives a good gauge for what the other disorders are. So basically, dissociative identity disorder is what one of our former therapists referred to as the most severe form of PTSD you can develop. And that is because with PTSD, a very common symptom is dissociation. Now, there are other dissociative disorders that I'm going to talk about in this video, because I'm going to talk about, again, OSDD is a little bit more separated and complex, which I'm going to go into more, but you can have dissociation outside of dissociative disorders, or you can have like PTSD with dissociative features. Or dissociation is also a common symptom of depression, of severe anxiety, schizophrenia. It's a very common symptom in more severe cases of mental illness. And there's also depersonalization, derealization disorders that are completely separate from what I'm going to be talking about today, which can just be a disorder of dissociating in itself. However, just dissociating doesn't mean you have a dissociative disorder. But I guess, you know what, I should define what dissociating is probably before we go any further. So dissociating is kind of completely disconnecting from reality. So you basically kind of feel like you leave your body a little bit, and you can, like, sometimes things just don't feel real, or you feel like when you look in the mirror, the person you're looking at, it seems distorted in some way. And with DID, that gets so complex that you look in the mirror and you can legitimately not recognize yourself, and when you look in the mirror, that is not you. Like, even now when I'm looking at my camera that says recording, I see the makeup and I'm like, well, yes, that's me, but it's just a bit odd because I don't really fully recognize myself. But I personally don't really know what I look like. Different alters can have different appearances, but we have a really hard time in this subsystem, which I'll go into what a subsystem is in a minute. We have a really hard time with having like a clear image of ourselves internally. But other parts in my system don't have that issue as much. But basically, so with dissociative identity disorder, you dissociate to the point where your brain fully separates itself. It puts up an amnesiac barrier between parts of itself, and they begin to grow and function separately. So one part will, when that part of the brain is in control, that gets different experiences, and when the other part of the brain is in control, they have other experiences. And this is something that is generally accepted to be caused by extreme childhood trauma. So repeated childhood trauma causes a PTSD response, which also causes high dissociation due to the chronic level of it or severe threat in the child's mind. Oh no. I shouldn't be itching my face. But it basically creates the inability to function as you are, so you feel like you need something more, and your brain then creates that by splitting itself in two potentially one part that doesn't hold trauma, and one part that deals with the traumatic experiences, is generally the most common way that that happens. Now, once this has happened at least once, and when this split happens, it can be anywhere. The first initial split can be one split, it can be multiple, it doesn't matter, but once it's happened one time, the brain then learns that when it's stressed, it can create a new identity state to deal with whatever. And I honestly feel like there's not a good word for alter, like, other than that is really descriptive enough to what an alter is, because alters, though we all are part of one whole, because it's one brain and the brain needs to work together and every part is needed to function and to survive, each alter, their individuality and their different abilities and characteristics are what makes them vital to the system. So individuality is important, but it's also important to remember that everyone needs to be working together and working towards the same common goal, because we are all still one and the same. So DID, what separates it from any other system experience is the amnesiac barriers are so strong that there is pretty much complete amnesia between alters. So when one personality is in front and they're experiencing something, the other alters, if they're not in the body as well, have no idea what's going on. It's completely black. So that leads to large gaps in amnesia, in life experience. A lot of times, like, until we did work in therapy, we had, like, the subsystem who first discovered we were a system and was out realized that they only had recollection of about 2 years of our life. And we got diagnosed when we were 17. And they could only remember about 2 years in total. And everything else was just completely black. And even now we've worked through therapy and we have a pretty solid gauge of, like, our, basically, I mean, at least I hope we know mostly what's happened to us, but there's still a lot of black spots in our memory where we just have no idea of, like, months at a time. It's just completely blacked out. And we've been working in therapy and trying to at least know where we were, like, and who hurt us. That's all we really need to know at this point, in our healing at least. But so DID has at least 2 distinct separate personality states, that, and alters can be more or less separate. So it's more common for systems to be covert systems, which I believe that this subsystem, which again, I will go into this in a minute. I know I keep referencing that term and not explaining it. I'm sorry. But we operate more as a covert system. But my system overall is an overt system. So a covert system is alters who have differences, but they, in the way they are perceived, you can't really tell the differences between alters as much. There's not as clear of a shift in personality that you can observe. It doesn't mean there's not a shift in personality, because there is, and alters are still just as separate, and it's, like, still, like, a similar circumstance with them developing their own thoughts, feelings, emotions, having different experiences, all of those things. However, what's different is with a covert system, alters more or less can appear to be the same, and it's something that's very easily hidden. It's why a lot of people say that DID is a disorder that's meant to be hidden, because of the way that a lot of classic systems form. Because classic systems tend to be covert and tend to have a host or a few hosts that are completely unaware that they have DID, and they function under the name and guides of either the body or the host, and they can appear to be the host. Everyone seems to be able to be that personality who is out the most, and that's how a classic system tends to be. However, this is where we stop seeing representation a lot of the time, because after DID you move into OSDD, which OSDD 1 is all I'm going to talk about in this video, but I will do a video going more in depth on OSDD 1 through 3. So OSDD 1 has two subsections. It has OSDD 1A and OSDD 1B. Basically, OSDD is other specified dissociative disorder, and in OSDD 1, it's basically, the way that I've heard it described that I think is easiest to grasp is it's DID but missing something. So DID, there's distinct alters and there is full amnesia. In OSDD 1A, alters are less distinct, and in OSDD 1B, there's less amnesia. Now, that doesn't mean that there is no amnesia, and that doesn't mean that in OSDD 1A, alters aren't separate, because they still are their own, like, individuals. But from what I've heard about OSDD 1A, I'm gonna stick with OSDD 1A first, and from what I've seen, there are two ways that I've seen this can be, here's the issue. I've seen a bunch of information of this online, and I did not save the accounts or anything, so I am going to go back and look for that, and I will put a group of accounts for OSDD 1A and 1B in the description, because there are quite a few accounts. On Instagram is where I have these accounts. I don't know that we might follow some systems, some OSDD systems on YouTube. We're just less active on here. But from what I have seen and from our experiences with the subsystems we have, a subsystem basically is a system within a system. I'll go more in detail in a little bit, but from our OSDD, what presents as OSDD 1A subsystems that we have, as well as from seeing other systems experiences, the few I've seen online, OSDD 1A tends to either have a host who is pretty much a host slash shell, and a shell alter is an alter who filters experiences in and out. So basically, the host will be a filter of, this is how we behave, this is what our voice sounds like, these are the typical mannerisms, this is my typical music taste, like those sorts of things, for example, will be what the host keeps the image up of, and then the other alters, as the host is struggling and needs help with different things, will come in, and they will be either co-conscious, or in times of high stress, they may take over to do their specific role. So you have less switching typically with OSDD 1A, because there will be like just alters trying to like support each other, and for the most part it'll be a host and maybe a co-host will be the people who are in charge of the system. The other way that I've seen this described in OSDD 1A is that all of the alters are fragments or just less developed, and they all see themselves as different variations of the same person. So, for example, Forgottens, I know that they have been on this channel before. They are a subsystem that functions in this manner. So they all are forgotten, but they change depending on which fragments are around. They change slightly, and you don't really necessarily notice the changes as much, but they don't really have a sense of separate identity. They just all collectively are forgotten. Their interests and their abilities and like comfort levels with different types of interaction, different like activities changes depending on which forgotten you get. And certain forgottens are geared more towards doing more caretaking, more protecting, which is different alter roles. And I think both of those roles seem pretty self-explanatory to me. I think that a lot of system rules tend to sound pretty self-explanatory to me, but I understand that it can be overwhelming when you're first learning about everything. So OSDD 1B is very similar to DID in the way it presents, with systems seeming to be more like having fully developed alters. The only thing that's different is alters tend to have more of a collective consciousness, and I would even argue, in what I've seen, that most DID systems, when going through healing, would no longer hit the criteria for OSDD and would instead hit the criteria for OSDD 1B, because of the fact that part of healing in DID is lowering amnesiac barriers. And we've noticed as we've healed, we've gotten so much less amnesia day to day. We basically tend to function like an OSDD 1B system. So basically that means that though Tegan has been out for the past month, I am able to remember what they've done, though that may in part also be due to the fact that we've been more co-conscious, which is when alters are, I think I've defined that term already in this video, but just to be safe, co-conscious is when alters are sharing consciousness. Co-fronting is when two alters are in control of the body at the same time. But so basically with OSDD 1B, you see a lot of more natural co-consciousness, which means that there tends to be less, that doesn't mean no difficulty, but there tends to be less difficulty with recalling details for day-to-day functioning, and though there is still going to be repressed, like dissociatively repressed trauma memories in OSDD 1B, and those memories like may or may not be shared. Trauma memories may or may not be shared within the system when it's OSDD 1B. Some OSDD-B systems have all remember the trauma and only dissociate emotions-wise, because one of the ways you're able to dissociate is to just stop feeling certain feelings or to only feel certain feelings. So sometimes in OSDD 1B systems, you will have one alter who like remembers the trauma, but like they don't feel connected to it at all. It's like it happened to someone completely different. So they're able to move on and function day to day without having flashbacks or worrying about it, even though they're aware of it. But other alters who hold that trauma would then have flashbacks and be struggling with it and be the ones processing and working through the other PTSD symptoms you get, aside from dissociation. Now, both DID and OSDD systems can be any size. That means that you can have as little as 2 alters, and you can have up into thousands and thousands of alters. My system's estimate at this point is around 10,000 alters. We're struggling fully mapping everyone, but that's what happens when you are a polyfragmented system. And a polyfragmented system is a system that has over 100 alters and or is very complex due to subsystems or side systems. Now, subsystems, as I said, and side systems are systems within systems. Now, what that means basically is that there is a separation of alters, and in our case, our subsystems can function as completely separate systems. So, like when the Time Rift subsystem was in charge, they switch constantly. They switch probably 15 to 20 times a day. And people are constantly coming in and out of being co-con. And so there's probably, if we're counting people who are coming in and out of being like co-fronting, they probably have hundreds of switches a day, at least 50 people coming in and out all day. We instead have had one person fronting for a month, and then the person who was the most co-conscious with them switched. And now I've been fronting for a few days consecutively. So, though we are the same system, we function very, very differently. And it's also a lot harder for alters who are inside in our system to have a memory or identity internally, whereas in the time rifts, they all have very, very complicated inner world lives, and we know that we have stuff going on inner world, we just can't remember it at all. And inner world, the internal world is where alters can interact with each other. So basically, the inner world is can be any sort of safe space the system creates, and our inner world happens to be very futuristic, multiple different dimensions. The time rifts are different pockets of those dimensions, so they are basically a bunch of subsystems, discarded alters combined into one subsystem. In, I don't remember whose words that was, I think it may have been Vienna's. But that came from someone in the time rifts. Vienna may not know Vienna is from the time rifts. If we don't know where they're from the time rifts. But my subsystem is the space station subsystem. We're on a giant space station. We have this big subsystem that has multiple different subsystems within it. And basically, polyfragmented systems just get really complex like that. You have systems within systems, and the difference between a subsystem and a side system is that subsystems are kind of able to interact with each other, whereas a side system is like a completely separate system. And what may have happened with the side system is it developed completely separately. So, for example, you had one system was developed during this trauma, when the body was 3, and then let's say, around the time the body was 6, completely different trauma started happening, and so a completely new system developed separately from the old system. And those two systems, like, let's give the example where, let's say, there's a child whose parents are divorced, and they're with dad, and dad is abusive, and they're with mom, and mom is abusive. When they're with the mom, the side system that deals with the mom's abuse is there, and when they're with the dad, the side system that deals with the dad's abuse is there. So these systems are in two completely different environments, never interacting with each other. They develop much more separately than other subsystems would. To our knowledge, we have a subsystem, one side system. We have no idea anything other than the fact that we have a side system. That's all we know. We don't know if they know we have DID. We know that they do not front very much, but pretty much at this point, anytime we have full blackout amnesia, it's because that side system has taken over. And it may even be someone we think is a subsystem, like some group we think is a subsystem, but they're actually a side system. So we may actually already be aware of them and just not have connected that that dimension is a side system as opposed to a subsystem. It's can be difficult to tell. Being polyfragmented gets very complicated. Polyfragmented systems can be caused by a variety of different things. What we have noticed in our experience, both based on our own system and on other systems that we talk to, because most of the systems that we do interact with are polyfragmented systems, we have found that what seems to be the most common cause of polyfragmentation is to experience multiple different types of trauma, because it means that you have to develop more skills to cope with more variety of situations, which means more alters are needed. And the other thing that aids this is multiple alters tend to split off due to one event or for one purpose. Like, for example, if there was a car accident, then one alter would split off to deal with the pain, one alter splits off to hold the trauma memory, and another alter splits off so they don't remember what it was like before the accident so they can still drive. And you have basically just more of a likelihood of becoming polyfragmented when you have to learn how to cope with more things, and your way of coping tends to be splitting a lot of the time. Another common cause of polyfragmented systems is ritualistic abuse or trauma-based mind control. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. I'm going to talk about that. It's definitely going to be getting its own video. But we want to talk about TBMC a bit more because we personally are not TBMC. But we are in contact with, again, most of the systems that we talk to are polyfragmented systems. And we have found that you're more likely to be TBMC if you are polyfragmented. However, that doesn't mean every polyfragmented system is TBMC. But basically what TBMC is and RA is a different type of system in and of itself. At least we would classify it as such, because these systems seem to have different difficulties and different ways of functioning, as such that we've had TBMC systems tell us that they haven't felt understood in system spaces even, because what happens in TBMC is the abuser uses abuse and torture, and order to, combined with a specific set of stimuli which conditions the victim into having a certain set of trauma responses called programs, which can affect their behavior if they are ever re-exposed to that stimuli. Now, basically, what this means is if someone traumatizes you while they are saying something to you, and they're having you do something, they want you to do something specific, then the next time they say that thing to you, you do whatever it is they have conditioned your trauma responses to tell you to do. So that's why it is literally trauma-based mind control. I want to just be clear that, like, this is a heavy topic, and it's something that is really scary to acknowledge exists, but I think ultimately we need to be talking about it a little bit more, a lot more, probably, actually, and we need to allow TBMC systems in system spaces to feel accepted, because a lot of things that TBMC systems experience is just not talked about. And basically, TBMC systems experience these programs, which basically, because if an abuser takes a child from a young age, knows how to create DID, they know they have to traumatize that child repeatedly, and that child will develop DID. If they take it a step further, they realize that alters behave and split off with characteristics either similar to the trauma, or they just tend to realize the way your brain naturally develops DID, and that gets taken advantage of and exploited, so an abuser can create and customize a system however they see fit. Which is not 100% true, because again, this is still your brain developing it. So those alters are still gonna have their own thoughts and feelings and ways to relate to the world and things that they want to do. They just have to overcome these trauma responses that have been intentionally set there to interfere with their entire life. So they basically, as a TBMC system, what happens is you're constantly having to fight with yourself to function, because any sort of stimulus really can be a cue, and that means that basically just existing day to day, and this goes the same for PTSD, anything can be a trigger. Basically existing day to day, you never know when a trigger's gonna happen. With PTSD, triggers lead to flashbacks. With cues, that leads to different programs being set off, different types of sets, which can lead to a variety of things. It can lead to someone believing something that's not true. It can be, a cue can make someone remember trauma. A cue can, make you want to go somewhere, or, for example, return to an abuser or seek out abuse. it's pretty terrifying to think that I really worry about the people in my life that are TBMC, and I just really care about them, and I just really hope that in more research being done, and if people could talk about it more and just start to understand it a little bit more, that they might have a bit of an easier time, because right now there's like no resources for TBMC systems. Therapists don't know about TBMC. This isn't something that's like acknowledged as even real a lot of the time, and it's worrying, and I want to bring up TBMC now, and we'll go into a lot more depth in a video on it, but we want to be talking more about TBMC stuff because not enough people are talking about it, and we want to be able to help be that voice. And we've talked to the TBMC systems in our life about this decision, and they are supporting us, and we are running over any information that we're like talking about with people beforehand who've experienced it. So I'm really hoping I'm getting everything right, but it is also very complex, so please do not hesitate to correct me if I say something wrong. But yes, I think that's all we're gonna say on TBMC. And the last point I wanted to make is we wanted to talk about endogenic systems and multigenic systems. So basically, there is a lot of discourse in the community about whether or not endogenic systems can exist. And even within my own system, we do not all agree on this subject. But this is what I am going to say now. If you hear someone else say something later, I warned you. We know that what causes a system to split is stress. Now, that stress is based on how the child perceives it at the time. And there are a lot of things that can happen in very early childhood that may be traumatic for a child that we may not even think could develop a system. Things such as being breastfed incorrectly, or having two working parents from a young age and not getting enough attention. There is a lot of ways that I could see it's possible that a system could develop having had no active, really traumatic things happen, but have things happen that were perceived traumatic from an infant who cannot defend itself and needs its parents to be its whole world. There's a set of standards that need to be hit, which not all people are able to attain, even if you think that you are. So even that, or how do we know, because there's so little research on DID, how do we know that it's not possible that certain medications that a mother is taking during pregnancy could have that type of effect on the brain? There's no studies that have been done. And what we do know is there are people who are claiming that they experience being a system as being endogenic or quiogenic or multigenic. There's multiple different ones. I'm not gonna go into detail about all the different types of that right now. We might make a video on that, but I frankly need to do more research on the specifics of it. But what we do know is that people are saying that they are endogenic, and there is a community of people whose experiences differ slightly from the medical model of DID, but the medical model of DID, like the medical model of any disorder, is based off of research that is societally biased. And so even in the DSM, it doesn't say that it's caused by trauma. That's just something that is so oftenly seen with systems that it's something that I think has kind of been written into the definition. I even explained it in my definition of DID because that's my experience as a system. However, it may not be the only experience, the only way to experience systemhood, and I think that I need to do more research, and I think that honestly a lot of people need to do more research before just flatly claiming that there's no way that these people could be experiencing systemhood. Because the other thing is, I've known a few systems who used to think they were endogenic before they realized they had trauma, and I really just don't think it's beneficial for anyone to be completely sitting here shaming endogenic systems when what we should be doing is trying to figure out the differences between endogenic systems and trauma-based systems to see where the differences are and if there's ways to tell so you can know what you need to do for yourself. We need to do more research. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents that I don't think it's completely impossible for a system to be endogenic, and I think a lot of the fact that DID and being a system is often medicalized also makes it harder to normalize just existing as a system, because multiplicity, I feel like, is something that should just be normalized in society. And if there are endogenic systems, that actually helps us, because that means telling someone you're a system doesn't automatically mean telling them you have trauma. That's just what I think. I mean, it would be nice if I could just tell people, yeah, I have multiple personalities, and they're like, chill, you know? Like, it might never happen, but I think we're not helping the stigma by trying to say that other people aren't systems, because no one knows their own experience better than them. I didn't come up with a segue for an outro, so thank you guys for watching this video. It was long, so I'm going to reward you with some cat footage while I do my outro. Here's a sleepy Baby Wujja, and thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video and are looking forward to us talking about a specific topic in one of the next in this series, please do leave a comment, because I would like to hear anything I may have missed out on so I can go more in depth with it later. And we have our link tree in the description. Would appreciate it if you checked out all of those. And I will probably see you again soon.